Hey, what's up? Silas here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about religions. Mostly the three Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and going further specifically with Christianity. It's the one I'm most familiar with. It's the one that has been existed in the cultures that I've lived in the most. And I have some things I want to talk about based on this religion. I'm going to be reading this article, 9 Misquoted Bible Phrases, at the end of this video once I open up with just a question that a friend of mine asked recently and a few thoughts that I've had just surrounding religion. So, for those of you who might not know, I am an atheist. Well, at least I'm. When it comes to religions, I think I even go as far to a pantheist. I just opened this one group on Facebook. It's like a pantheist for peaceful parenting or something like that. Essentially, it's coming from the background of understanding the non-aggression principle and just not having any evidence to actually back up some of the truth claims and the truth claims made by different religions and faiths that I've come across in my shortish life, compared to the expanse of the human race has existed in this world. The number of religions that I've heard of, I haven't heard of one where I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That's something I can buy. Now, if there is a supernatural being, what I'm saying is there is no religion out there that I've found that has accurately explained how that being would exist to the point that makes sense that you should worship that being along that being in the way that this particular religion says you should. So does that make any sense where I'm kind of at in this situation? Okay, so the question my friend asked was this. And this is a question that I've had to ask myself and other people, and it's come up often in the recent times as some issues are occurring in the United States of America, in the West, in other places in the world, where they're saying, okay, one of the biggest problems that we have is a lack of Christianity. God has been taken away from the classroom, God has been taken away from the households, God has been taken away from the culture, and that's why we're seeing all these struggles and tests that the Western world is going through. Some people claim this, but I've take pause on that. I live here in Nairobi, Kenya, and right now I'm in Nairobi, Kenya, and I've lived in different places. I've lived in Rome, Italy, and I'd say the Italians in general. The Vatican isn't in Italy, isn't in Rome for no reason. I'd say the Italians are very strong in their religiosity, more so than other Western European countries. United States of America, for sure, of the biggest developed countries in the world, or not the biggest developed countries in the world. I don't know. Does Russia count? Anyway, so of the developed countries in the world, the United States of America is by far the most religious one, especially the Western powers. So to claim that the reason that the United States of America is struggling is because of the lack of religiosity has some holes in that, at least when they're talking about Christianity in specific. But this was the question my friend asked. This is a topic that has been on my mind lately, and I wanted to hear everyone's thoughts on: has Christianity, one, played a major role in the development of the Western civilization? Two, hindered Western civilization from reaching an even higher peak? And then three, has no distinguishable effect either way? So I answered that and a few other people answered, but just think about that question. And can you answer that? Whether you are religious, whether you are in the West, what are your thoughts? The first one was, did it play a major role? The second, did it hinder it? Or is there no real effect that Christianity has had in the development of Western civilization? What's your answer before I kind of get into what mine is? Just giving you a little time to think about that. Um, so yeah, let's get into. I guess you could pause the video. I don't have to give you a little time to think about it. You could just pause the video and think about it and come up with the answer. Then I'm going to get into my answer now. So I was saying that I'm leaning more towards the third option in this situation because I can't really find a way to extricate Christianity from Western civilization. They're part and parcel. You know, some people will say, "Oh, Christianity is the kind of a base that enabled the Western civilization to occur, enabled science, enabled these things." And yes, you can find some very good examples of how the church and how the Christian faith in general, came together to kind of help science, help scientific advancement, help rational advancement in a certain way. A lot of the great thinkers of old, a lot of the philosophers and these kind of thinkers, they were ostensibly Christian or religious. Now, how much of that was them just knowing that, hey, I am smart enough to know that if I don't go out here and actually say that I am religious, first of all, people won't listen to what I'm saying. I may actually get killed for not saying this. So these people were intelligent enough to understand that for me to get my message out there, yes, I can curry favor by saying I'm religious. I can couch this in a religious sense and say this is God's work in this certain way. Because if you just come out and say, yeah, this is anti God, some people might just be like, no, we're not going to listen to anything you say. We're not going to really understand where you're coming from if you're basing this on a completely rational, fact-based, factual basis. So if you couch it in the terms of religion, then maybe more people are also interested in funding you. You understood like the church and other kind of other religious people had a lot of control on the funds, and they still do. I think they still do today. So you understood if I wanted to have actual funding for this, if I wanted to be allowed to actually go into this scientific field, to go into this study, to actually propose this new way of doing things, if I couch it in religious terms, there's a lot better chance of it actually taking on. There's a lot better chance of me actually getting that funding. There's a lot better chance of people being cooperative with this if they look at it in that sense. And now, does it matter if I tell you that, hey, to take this penicillin, it came to me from a vision from God, and then you end up saving millions of people? Or if somebody just says, oh, this is because when you break down like this, it's bacteria in your body, and then when this thing is rotting, it's just dying this way, and you extract this and you put it in this pill form, and then you take it in, and then now you're healthier. And people are like, that sounds like devil work, or that sounds like XYZ, I'm not going to do that. And then millions of people end up dying. Now, if you're the person in charge of doing that, you're kind of being inconsiderate by not just going out and saying that, yes, this actually is due to religion. Or even if it's a situation where you don't have to outright come out and say it, but someone just hints at it, like, is that because of this? You don't have to come out and say, like, in some situations, I think it's counterproductive for you to go out and just say, like, yes, this has nothing at all to do with God. You can just leave it unanswered, let people fill in the gaps if they want to in that way. And that's the fill in the gaps thing. That's the God of the gaps thing. I think for me, that's kind of how my journey with religion came to be, where I was raised in Christian, mostly Protestant faiths. It wasn't any one specific church all the way through. It's a lot of time in Presbyterian churches in my teens around that year, and then around that time, when I was here in Nairobi, Kenya, it was more Catholic and Anglican church. I attended a Catholic school for a while. Um, so even when I went to college, when I was out of the house, I think once I was old enough to stop going to church, sometime in high school, I kind of stopped going. I'd go occasionally, but my parents wouldn't be that into it, that forceful into making me go. Um, Even in college, I studied religion to an extent. I was in this religious group for athletes and things like that. And then that's when I had my final breakthrough, I think, when I was like, no, I can't really buy this. And I remember there was one specific situation where the leader of this group, or this students group, the student leader of the students group, was a very devout Christian by his own acclaim. He had some issues that I had with when it came to fidelity, when it came to relationships with females, and that he said it was his vice, and I was like, okay, why is your one vice something that actually affects other people? I'd understand if your vice was drinking, and yeah, drinking and all these drug use and things like that affect other people. Even if you're overweight, it affects other people and things like that. But it's not directly messing with somebody's mind or brain or whatnot. So that was kind of like, I was wondering. And then one specific situation I remember asking, okay, and this is a question I had at that time, and I guess I'll also ask you guys. When somebody like Gandhi, I was looking at someone like Gandhi's life and the things that he's done. Now, this was before I knew a lot of, no, it wasn't Gandhi, it was the Dalai Lama. Because with Gandhi's done some really suspect things, which he was very racist. But anyway, back to the point. So someone like the Dalai Lama, I was like, ostensibly the Dalai Lama, who just lives his life to do positive things, the Buddhist kind of lifestyle. At this point, I had taken some religion courses, I had done research on myself. I was really interested in trying to find out what is the basis of the world. How do people approach things? And people's religion goes across different. It's hard for me to extricate the religion from the way people believe and the way people act, because it goes across. It's your belief system. It's your foundation. So, coming back to this thing, the Dalai Lama, for all intents and purposes, I was thinking that's the person who's living a life as close to any one that I have heard of being described in Christian faiths, except he hasn't accepted Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior, or he doesn't acknowledge that. And it's to the point where he definitely knows about it, let alone the people who lived good lives in the past, who did not, who lived before Jesus existed, who lived before Christianity, who are in places like in the countryside of Kenya, who have never actually heard of the Bible, never actually heard a translation, never in a position where they can actually understand the words that are being said there for them to actually accept or reject God in this kind of sense. So someone like the Dalai Lama, he's definitely heard about God, about Jesus, about Jehovah. He's definitely heard about the triune God of Christianity. He's definitely heard about that. And I think he's at the point where he can understand what they're proposing. And he's gone to the point where he said, no, I don't believe in that. So it's a situation where he has rejected Jesus Christ as the one and only Son of God. So I was asking someone like him, even if he's lived his excellent life helping people, being good, I think they don't want to hurt animals, they don't want to do things, they want to be part of the earth. I don't know, not part of the earth, sorry. I'm going to like woo-woo and Buddhism. But anyway, what I was trying to say was someone like the Dalai Lama has lived a good life. But if he dies, you're supposed to tell me that that person is going to go to hell. Yet a Christian who may have done some horrible things in his life, may have been abusive to his children, may have been a drunkard, may have been a cancer to people in society, and then maybe at his deathbed or something, he just like, yes, I accept Jesus Christ. And let's say we assume that he really does accept everything that he's done in his life was negative, and he gets a turnover and he's not just saying it just to say it. That person is going to get into heaven, yet the Dalai Lama is going to go to hell. And the guy was like, he didn't even take a break when I asked him this. He was like, yeah, that's the way it is. And I was just like, well. And it made me realize that a lot of people do have that mindset. And going even further with that situation, then that was one of my main points where I was already kind of leaving the faith completely, being like, okay, even before that, I had points where I was like, I think I may be an atheist. I'm not quite sure what that is, what that entails, but I just can't buy this. I've never able to completely fall into it and understand it and take it in as facts, in the same sense that 2 plus 2 is 4. It was kind of like 2 plus 2, 2 plus 2. I don't even know how to explain the faith level that I had towards religion, because it was like where somebody may bring me 4 things and just tell me like, I found this because somebody, no, I really can't even, totally can't even find a way to analogize the way my approach, my belief to faith was. I think that's why it wasn't there. I can't actually find some way to analogize it and actually explain it and put it out in a way compared to the 2 plus 2 is 4. Like 2 plus 2 is just 4. It's just something you believe, something you know. It's something you feel in your heart. Nothing you can feel in your heart. It's just knowledge. is that right? It's just tough for me. How can you guys analogize your 2 plus 2? If you are religious, or if you were and then you've kind of come out of it, do you have an analogy for that might help? Whereas I'm saying the fact-based knowledge for me is 2 plus 2 is 4. It's something I don't have to feel it's right. I just know it's right. It's just the information. It's practical. It's there. So what's a good analogy to explain how you felt about religion, or how you currently feel about religion, compared to how 2 plus 2 is 4 when it comes to something scientific, fact-based, etc.? So I'm going to get into the reading of this now. And yeah, here we go. So 9 misquoted Bible phrases. This is going to be a link below to this. It's from Desert News in the Faith. So, the Bible is considered to be a book full of spiritual wisdom and insight to help individuals navigate their lives and strive to follow God. However, as full of counsel as the Bible is, there are a number of popular proverbs and familiar sayings that are not recorded in the Bible, but that are commonly thought to originate there. Because Bible ignorance is a pervasive problem, according to religious scholars, these sayings are often not challenged, but are simply taken as biblical truth. Read on to find which biblical phrases actually aren't biblical at all. So this is interesting, because there were some of these that and this is one thing I also came across when I was coming out of religion. I came to understand that even post the time when they used to keep the Bible in Latin, so most of the people couldn't understand, couldn't read it. Then you come to the printing press, the Gutenberg press came out, and the Bibles were printed. And then some of the reformers came out, and they thought that, hey, if people could actually read the Bible and understand it on their own, then everybody would be called to become priest. We'd have this church that was within every single person, where they would take it upon themselves to have a relationship with God, and then you'd kind of take away the ability to have a centralized group of people. And almost whenever you have a centralized group of people with this much power, it's going to be tempting for the people who want to do bad things with that power to go there and hold that power over people. And there's a long history of corruption in churches, in whichever organizations have this concentration of power over a large group of people. It's one of the most addictive things to actually have, just that ability to say something and have groups of people, hundreds of thousands, almost millions of people just do what you do what you want, do what you said that they should do. So the first one, money is the root of all evil. This is a common one. I think a lot of people hear this, and here we go. This is one, actually a friend of mine corrected me with this, because I was doing that one video, or I was writing about something with this, and then I did that one video also about how like avocados and things like that grow on trees, how money does grow on trees, because it grows in trees, it blows in the air through us, it streams along in waterways and things like that. Because the way money is a means of exchange. It's something you actually go out and do something with, and you use your mind, you apply your mind and find ways to make money out of things. So yes, trees in themselves, the things that grow on trees, you can get those fruits, you can go sell them. So money is kind of growing on trees in that sense. But I think the thing was the means of exchange, where I was like talking about how this quote, money is the root of all evil, is often said, but then I was like, okay, money is just a means of exchange, so it's not really in there. So I was trying to make an economic point with it. And then somebody pointed out this here, where he says, this passage, based on a letter from the Apostle Paul, is to a young pastor named Timothy, and is found in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10, which says, the love of money is the root of all evil. Without the word love, the verse takes on a completely different meaning and gives the impression that money in and of itself is evil. So even when it comes to the religious people, and this is one thing, going back to what I was saying at the start, people don't really understand, or people haven't really read the Bible. I find people who, I'm like, okay, you're religious, right? You believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. You're telling me this. You believe that the God who created everything has actually given us words, direct words on his creation. And you have availability to read that book, yet you're spending time reading 50 Shades of Grey, or you're watching the sport, you're studying the Final Four so you can find the right brackets, to the right people to bet on. You're spending time just hanging out with your friends. You're going watching a movie. Why wouldn't you not be a biblical scholar if you really thought that that was the truth? Why would you not spend your time to memorize that, or at least have an app where you could always just call it up and be like, hey Siri, or hey Bible-y, what would you call it? They should do an app like this where it's like a Siri thing, but it's like the Holy Ghost. I think that might be sacrilegious. But you're just like, hey Ghosty, can you tell me what the Bible says about this? Why won't you be constantly going to it? It'd be like the ultimate cheat code. It'd be the ultimate guide to life if you actually thought it was the truth. Yet you have these people who just haven't read it, who just misquote things. And I'm just like, So yes, this misquotation thing here for the love of money, I think that makes sense. But it's also good to see that even with Christianity, and this is what I'm saying, there is some relationship with Christianity and the positives of the Western world. Now, I think they grew up together. I think they shaped each other. I don't think you can extricate one from the other. And that's why I was going with number 3 on that first thing. I don't think it was the key to Western civilization. I don't think it was the key to limiting Western civilization, but I do think it was key in developing. They developed together. They're kind of a symbiotic relationship. So, the next one. The Lord works in mysterious ways. So, this particular phrase is not found anywhere in the Bible. Although it is often misquoted as being a Bible verse, there are several ideas about where this saying grew from. One being a hymn written by William Cowper in the 19th century that says, God moves in mysterious ways. His wonders to perform, he plans his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. There are several verses that may seem to allude to this as idea as well, including Romans 11, chapter 11, verse 33. O depth of the riches both on of the wisdom and the knowledge of God! How unsearchable are his judgments, and his ways past finding out. The King James Version. So for me, this is another one that I found uh, to be such a nuisance and annoyance about religious people, especially Christian people. They would come out and say this, and again, as I'm saying, they haven't really read the Bible in many cases, because if they knew the Bible, they could actually call out some quote. And there's this thing, I think Christopher Hitchens or someone else said it. What you find out, the more somebody knows about the Bible, the less likely they are to be Christian. Which is something that I have found out. I found there are many, okay, not many, I don't want to say it. I'm not going to make any. I think there's actual studies trying to find this out, but recently being atheist, I think, has become more of a fad where people just like, yeah, I'm an atheist. I'm like, why? Like, have you actually some points of why you're this and that? And then they'll have religious faith in other things. And that's why that's the thing. I think at the start there, I am atheist, but I'm also a-religious. And a-religious is against religious thoughts, trying to organize your world on religious faith-based things, because I think the state itself, statism, is the biggest religion going on right now. And I was talking about before how it goes from polytheism, monotheism, and now we're at metheism, where people themselves are the godheads in their religions, and the forms of theology that they have is statism, where they believe the state itself is some kind of supernatural entity that can do things that human beings cannot, even them themselves. Although they're not really a human being in that sense, they take themselves out as a godhead. But yeah, let's get back into this. So the Lord works in mysterious ways. I make these videos in mysterious ways. My brain works in mysterious ways, trying to make some sense out of these things. But this Lord works in mysterious ways was such an out thing. When people would be like, yeah, okay, so how about this? How about that? How about the kids that died from cancer? Oh, the Lord works in mysterious ways. No. Your brain isn't working in a mysterious way right now. You just don't know what you're talking about, and you're just using this as an out. I don't think it's right. I mean, just say you don't know. Say you don't know, but don't say the Lord works in mysterious ways in that kind of sense. Because if the Lord works in mysterious ways, then when he wrote down this, supposedly he gave this book to people for people to understand him, why would he do that? Why would the Lord do that? Did the Lord explain himself to you so you can actually believe him enough? Or was it mysterious? Or is it the kind of situation where when you have some ability where you're like, yes, he's mysterious, unless he's not mysterious where I can understand him, or he's mysterious to you and to these other people, but I can understand him in these other things because I am super smart and I'm super awesome, and we have this kind of conversation with him. That's a part that I didn't really get. I thought it was a bit of a cheat code. I thought it was a bit of a Weasley kind of tactic to just say, like, yes, he works in mysterious ways. Okay, next, the 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly sins is a categorical list of sins that, according to popular myth, lead to death. They are gluttony, greed, sloth, lust, vanity, envy, and wrath. History shows that this list was compiled by theologians and used in various commentaries over the centuries. Proverbs chapter 6, verse 16 to 19 says, "These 6 things the Lord hates. Yes, 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one that sows discord among brethren." Although this verse may have been the inspiration for the 7 deadly sins list, nowhere in the Bible does it say that these are deadly. Now, with the 7 deadly sins, this is one thing that I've been very interested in the 7 deadly sins, and I think back in 2007, I did these drawings, these illustrations of these clowns. I might put a few of them on the screen right now. And I'm going to have some merch for them too. And I'm going to try to use these as kind of the central evils in this story that I've been working on, that I keep mentioning that I don't really come out and actually present it in a video yet. Anyway, so in the 7 deadly sins, I've done these drawings of clowns as them, and I kind of studied what the 7 deadly sins were and started finding out that these are kind of things that were in the general society as Christianity came into these societies, into these cultures. So that's one thing Christianity was really good at. It kind of went in and absorbed certain things and said, okay, yes, we'll kind of co-opt this in a certain way, or Part of the reason that this was being talked about in these certain cultures was because these were just general knowledge things. These were things that people knew from going around. Where these things, like I'm saying, these proud look, lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among brethren. This is the kind of things that a Buddhist could say. This is the kind of thing that a Muslim could say. This is the kind of things that probably a Zoroastrian can say. These are probably things like a giantess can say. So this is probably things that were taught in some hills in Africa while this was being developed, like hundreds of thousands of years before this was being developed in the Middle East. These were things that were being taught. These are kind of basic knowledge things where if you follow these things, yeah, these are terrible things to do. And in some cases, when you were caught doing these things in previous kind of cultures, you were just killed for doing them. So this was a kind of a thing where I think having them being deadly, yeah, that kind of goes through there. But yeah, anyway, Seven Deadly Sins, very interested with those. Really like these clown drawings. Going to do some new ones for some more merch and things like that. But I'll probably do separate videos. I want to do a series of videos where I kind of talk about the different clowns and different sins and actually go into an example of those kind of sins or the things, maybe things that I've done, and then kind of suggest like, hey, if you guys have something where you thought you went in this, where you were tempted by this kind of sin to do this kind of thing, maybe, I don't know, maybe I was thinking of something where if you have a cool story you want to share, maybe you can get like a free sticker or something. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. Anyway, so the next one, God helps those who help themselves. This verse did not originate in the Bible, but has been repeated often by various speakers and writers throughout the centuries, like Benjamin Franklin in Poor Richard's Almanac of 1757. The Bible, in fact, speaks often about how much God helps humankind. However, there are instances in the Bible that point the necessity for people to take action in their own behalf in tandem with God's work. For example, Romans chapter 5, verse 6 and 8, and then Proverbs chapter 28, verse 26, and Jeremiah chapter 17, verse 5. Okay, so this is one that was keeping me in religion, that when I was still in there to saying, okay, yes, God helps those that help themselves. I thought this was in there, and I started reading the Bible. I think I've read most of the Bible. I think I read it once, and I'm thinking, yeah, okay, people who know more about the Bible, people didn't read the Bible before. But yeah, I think I made it all the way through the Bible. I don't know if it was all in a row. I think one time I tried reading it all the way in the row and got maybe 2/3 of the way through it after different times. But from my time in Bible courses and in churches, I've jumped around to different parts. I know there's certain books, entire books, that I've read the entire thing. Revelation was definitely one. I was like, oh, you get to the end and you can find out. How do people not know what's happening in Revelation? If people are like, yes, God has told you how the world is going to end, and you haven't read Revelation, seriously, or Revelation or the first one, read the start or the end. At least get to that point if you're claiming to be like, Christian. But anyway, this is one thing I thought was positive. I used to say this to people, and when people were struggling, when people were hurt, or people didn't understand how, when people would ask me, or religious people would ask me, like, okay, how come God hasn't helped me? Or that's something that I used to say, would be like, yes, God helps those who help themselves. And I thought that was kind of a positive thing, where it kind of puts the onus on you as a person to kind of go out there and do things. And I think this is part of why I'm saying there may be certain relationship between Christianity and Western society, where if this was part of the general things that were said about Christianity, even though it wasn't directly in Christianity, but why is this associated with Christianity in the Western kind of world? I think it's because there was a certain work ethic that people said, okay, let's not just expect this exterior force to help us, but let's get into a situation where we help ourselves, and if we put ourselves in the best situation possible, then possibly things that we can't control may actually fall into line. Let's get ourselves in the best position possible to meet everything that happens at that time. So if something bad happens, but you've been working out and you've been ready for this, then even just your instincts will kind of respond in a positive way. But if something bad happens and you've been resting on your laurels and you've been lazy and you're unprepared to actually deal with things, then chances are that bad thing will be a lot worse than it actually is. This is kind of a positive thing. I think this, from so far, I think this is a good one that I was like, yeah, this is kind of good to be added there. But that's what I'm saying. How many things about Christianity that you think are positive things about Christianity itself were actually things that came from the culture and have been associated with Christianity versus coming from Christianity and being associated with the culture? Okay. So, the next one. Cleanliness is next to godliness. The Bible never specifically addresses cleanliness being next to godliness, meaning that being clean is a form of godly behavior. The proverb is popularly credited to John Wesley's 1778 sermon, Cleanliness is indeed next to godliness, as well as the writings in the Jewish holy scripts, the Talmud. It is not, however, found in the Bible. So right here, this is another thing. I think you didn't really have running water, or people didn't really bathe that often, or just hygiene in general wasn't really that strong in the Western world long into the Industrial Revolution, I think. That whole don't throw the baby out with the bathwater wasn't just said, it wasn't just a saying, like it actually used to happen where the father would come and since I think he would come back from the coal mine or from working outside and he'd be the dirtiest, and then he'd go into the bathtub, he'd clean himself, then the mother would clean themselves, and the older kids would clean themselves, and then the baby would clean themselves last. And it used to be just the water that was taken from there they would all use the same water because water wasn't available as much as possible. And that's the things that I'm saying. Here in Nairobi, Kenya, you have people just living in there are these slums right by here. I don't know if they're called slums right now because they've been built up, but you see people living in mabati homes, which is just a corrugated metal homes and things like that. And they don't really have access to water. They're still using like communal showers in these kind of neighborhoods and things like that. And that's what I'm saying. Like some things that you think about with the West, that people think about in the West, that happened hundreds of years ago, are realities in my life from my travels. So that's one thing it's been tough for me to kind of put certain things into context and be like, yes, I see your struggle here in your lifestyle here in the United States of America, yet I see somebody else here in Nairobi, Kenya, living in something where you would consider to be like an ancient, foregone kind of conclusion where this was something that happened to our ancestors, yet it's something that happened to somebody here in Nairobi, Kenya that I've met, that I know, and they aren't dealing with it. They aren't depressed by it. They aren't. So it's this. It's a weird situation. But anyway, cleanliness is next to godliness. So that shows that necessarily wasn't coming out of religion. See, 1778 sermon was when it first came out, as it's also said it's as well as writings in the Jewish holy scripts, the Talmud. That's what I'm saying with the relationship with these Abrahamic religions. They're kind of together there. What comes from one place, what comes from another place. But cleanliness is next to godliness. I think it's another positive thing, and I think it's another example of something coming out from the culture into the religion rather than from the religion into the culture. So, the next one. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24 says, "The one who withholds or spares the rod is one who hates his son." Verses like this one are probably the inspiration for the proverb that people often misquote as being biblical. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 15 says, "Foolishness is bound upon the heart of a child. The rod of discipline will remove it far from him." Although similar in concept, the actual phrase, "spare the rod, spoil the child," is not biblical. So, as I mentioned earlier, I just follow the non-aggression principle. I try to follow the non-aggression principle as much as possible in my life and form that as a basis to how I approach people, approach things, and things like that. So that goes from lying to people, which I think brings harm to people, to outright abuse. And one thing that I have seen, and this one book that I suggest everyone reads, The Origins of War and Child Abuse, and just to see the high level of actual child abuse that's occurred all across human society, all across human history. And there's no aspect to say that, yes, Christianity in general has something about hitting kids less than other religions. And for me, I think it's rather clear to say that child abuse is part of what has limited societies and cultures from getting to where they can. If there's anything that to take out, and then now with this spare the rod, spoil the child, this is another thing where I don't think it came out of the religion, but it's showing how the culture itself, they were used to hitting kids, and then they took onto this, they glommed onto this and said, yes, that's actually something that's in the Bible. I've heard people who were directly defended child abuse and said, in the Bible it says spare the rod, spoil the child. But no, what they're saying is the rod of discipline. Now the rod of discipline is just a rod of discipline does not necessarily mean a stick to hit somebody with. Like here, it's not directly written hit somebody. And it's also part of the patriarchy thing, hates his son. I think this was like hates his daughter. Like, oh my god, we were talking about hitting. The Bible was so against women, they're hitting women. And they have the whole thing where it's like, oh, you're not supposed to hit your wife with something that's not thicker than your thumb, the rule of thumb or thing like that. I don't know if that's actually in the Bible or something like that, some idiotic thing like that. But no, this is not about hitting children. So if you are Christian and you're using this as part of why you hit your kids, you just need to stop. Just stop hitting your kids. It's not the right thing to do. It's not part of discipline. Hitting children is not part of discipline. It will engender fear. It may engender some kind of obedience, but not even obedience. It's going to engender fear and wariness from something. It might get somebody to do what you. It's kind of like that whole thing where like hitting the side of an electronics machine that's not working is not fixing the machine. It may knock some things into the right place where it's like, okay, that's where it works, and then the thing is actually displaying what you want it to display or doing what it wants to do. But you're not that's not part of fixing the machine. That's just addressing an issue right there and then having that issue stop at that moment. You haven't actually disciplined the child. You haven't actually given that child a sense of obedience, a sense of respect towards what you are. It's fear, and fear is not a part of discipline. It's not a part of good parenting. Awareness of something is different than fear. So when it comes to this, I think spare the rod thing, the rod of discipline, is more a guide, a rule, a road. Think of it more as a road of a guidance, of some kind of framework. And that's one thing what they're talking about here. So I think in that aspect, it's something that can continue with Christianity. I heard some people, I think it was Duke Pester, who kind of described this, and other people who have addressed it in different ways. But I personally know or heard of a lot of very devout Christians who are in a lot of communities. I think there was one for specific. I was listening to the Jason Stapleton program, he's more of like a libertarian speaker. He had this really good show, kind of going over a news thing, was doing a daily thing, talking about different things, different topics, and was like, yeah, I would liking his political material. And then he started talking about hitting his kids, and I was just like, okay, I can't listen to you anymore. For me, that's one thing that, for me, is a no-go thing. I think that's one situation where I find it very hard to support somebody or participate or partake in their information, in their material, if I know that they openly advocate for hitting children. For me, that's one of those, I think, no-go zones. I'm just like, yeah, we're done. You may be doing a lot of positive work, and I might not outright speak against you, especially against that positive work that you're doing, but I personally do not feel I can continue to partake in that content, in that work, if I know you also advocate. You also use that platform, you also use that ability that you have to advocate for hitting children. Now, I'm trying to get to the point where I can also completely do that in my personal life, where I can just be like, look, if you hit kids, I don't want you to be around in my life. And I've done that to an extent, and it's also part of the reason I think why I'm very hermit mode right now, trying to figure out the better way to outline my life where I go forward, where everybody in my circle, especially if I do get the chance ever to be blessed enough to actually have kids. And yeah, you can say blessed and be a religious, because I think it still is a blessing in a sense, blessing from just existence. But if I ever do have kids, I do not want to put my kids in a position where they are around other kids that have been abused, because those kids can then reenact that abuse on the child. Or just, I want them to have parents and other responsible adults around who I can be like, yeah, my kid needs some help, or I need to be somewhere else. Can you help out? And not have to worry like, would they hit my kid? Would they aggress against my kid while I'm not there? Things like that. So these are interesting things to have. I have a series on that, Hands Up, Don't Hit. I need to update that more, but you can check out more on that there. There's going to be links below to that as well. But spare the rod, spoil the child. In Christianity, they don't say hit your kids. So people who are using that as a defense for it, stop it. Okay, next one. Pride goeth before the fall. Pride goeth before the fall is a saying that is similar to the original Bible verse found in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18. But it does not accurately reflect the original text. In fact, the verse says, pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. This shows that destruction is the end result of pride according to the Bible. So this one again, it describes the seven deadly sins. So some of those things are mentioned in the Bible. So I think it's understanding for people to say, "Oh yeah, the seven deadly sins," because they may have read the Bible and seen that as being part of the culture, as being part of something that was written by human beings who have lived the human experience. We kind of know what's negative. We know the things that are sinful. We know the things that are negative. We know the things that are positive. We know the things that are glorious. No, things that are worth being glorified. So they may have heard things about pride, things about gluttony, things about sloth, things about lust, things about greed, things about what is the one I'm forgetting? Envy, because I know the envy one that's in the Ten Commandments. So there's things that you hear in these different places, and I think people may have kind of pieced those together, like, yeah, I know I've read about something directly quoted from the Bible about pride and all these other things. So maybe they actually did talk about them somewhere that I haven't read in the Bible altogether. So I can understand why people might think the seven deadly sins actually are directly mentioned in the Bible. Okay, next. The three wise men. Nowhere in the Bible is the number of wise men, kings, or magi, as they are also called, who visited Jesus Christ after his birth recorded. So this is kind of a key one. I mean, just go out there. If you're a Christian and you listen to this, did you think there was three of them? Now, if you're not Christian, if you know somebody that's Christian, ask them about the Bible story. Ask them about the story of Jesus Christ. Do people know that I think there's two different tellings of it? It was like Mark and then John, or is it Mark and Peter? There's two different tellings of Jesus' life. I don't know if it's just Jesus' birth or it's also his. I'm probably going to look this up. So with the editing magic, here it is. I looked it up, and the two different stories of Jesus' birth are from Matthew and Luke. So links below also to some articles or some webpage kind of talking about the two differences between those two tellings. But there's two different tellings of it. Most people don't know that. I don't think most people understand that. Now, this is something that's super key. If this was the actual story about the way that the Godhead who came onto earth, who became human, and was born onto earth, born from the Virgin Mary, to die for your sins. If that was a key part, you accepting Jesus Christ, like how can you even accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior when there's an actual book about how he was brought onto the earth, yet you don't understand how that came to be? You don't know that the three wise men weren't mentioned. If you are in a situation where you're like, yes, I've accepted Jesus in my life as my Lord and Savior, and you don't know that the three wise men weren't there, or you think the three wise men were actually a part of it, then what are you basing your belief on? And you see, this is why I'm suspect about certain people who are religious. Because it's like, look, if you can actually believe that without knowing the information, when the information is there, readily available, then how many other things in your life are you telling me you believe or you will do or I can trust you on that are based on as little as information? Where it's like, yes, I ask you, hey, can you deliver this to me in this day? And then somebody will be like, yeah, I'll bring it to you because I have it, I know I'll do that, and just trust me. And then they're doing it because they believe somebody told them they'll do that. They believe they may have a vehicle at that time, or they believe at this. So I'm like, I'd rather go with somebody who's like, yes, I like basing the things I say and do and act on actual solid facts. I just, it just calls into question some of the belief systems, some of the foundation that people operate on. And I still do have a lot of religious friends, and I'm still going to hold them as my friends. And we've had some of these conversations with them, and I think with those friends, I've already built enough of a structure outside of it. But I think it's a lot harder for me right now to pick up friends that are very devout, that are very religious. Let me try to see with the recent friends that I made. Yeah, some of them are, but it hasn't really been the key thing that we built our friendship on. It's mostly like politics and philosophy and things like that. So if you are religious and you can still carry those things on, then hey, that's kind of a positive thing. And speaking about politics and religion, I might get to this at the end. I think we got one more. Yeah, I'll get to this at the end. So, this last one, this too shall pass. This is one that's close and dear to me. With a lot of the digressions that I go through, I think I should be using this a lot. Like, this too shall pass. Like, yeah, bear with me. I know I'm going on a digression. I'm going on a digression right now to describe why this is a positive thing for me to use. Is because this too shall pass. Some of these digressions I go on shall pass. But anyway, back into what's written here. This too shall pass. People often use this phrase when working through difficult circumstances in life and give credit to the Bible. However, it is not found there. There is not one definitive answer to the origin of this popular saying, but the common belief is that it stems from a fable written by Persian Sufi poets. Often, others credit it to Jewish folklore, saying it originated with King Solomon, and although it is not recorded in the Bible. So you see right here, Persian Sufi poets. So these are people from the Middle East. Christianity is a Middle Eastern religion. So this is one thing I was also asking with this thing. I was saying in that question that that my friends asked, was Christianity part of what made Western civilization Western civilization? Did it limit Western civilization from reaching certain heights? Was it nondescript? Was it a non-issue one way or the other? And one thing I was wondering was, okay, if you're claiming that Christianity was part and parcel of Western society, then why isn't the same kind of advancement seen out of Islam, which is also a Abrahamic religion coming from the Middle East? Now, if it is not, then if it's actually a Middle Eastern thing and not a Western thing, Christianity, then did the Western world appropriate it from Muslim world? Not from the Muslim world, from the Middle Easterners. Are Middle Easterners considered part of the Western world? Is it, if it's a key part, if a key part of what developed the Western world came from the Middle East, is the Middle Eastern region, I know it's on the same continent, the Eurasian continent. It's all on the same landmass. So is that part of it? And that's why you go and you start wondering the cultures and the races and the things like this, the things intermixing. Where did it go? Where did it fit? There's just a lot of intricacies here that are hard to deal with. So going back to what I was saying before with the belief system things, this is one thing that I find hard. Some of these questions, like where do you get one thing from the other? And my friend who wrote that that question that I mentioned at the start, he posted this under my whole asking about, when I was explaining why is it something about Western society and Christianity happened. So if it was just Christianity, then you'd see the exact kind of same thing from Judaism and Islam, since they're all Abrahamic religions. And then I also was asking, do you consider Jewish people to be part of the Western world? Because some people don't. There's a whole like Jewish question by some people in the race realist, white nationalist type of societies. Then there's also there's a bunch of Democratic politicians in the United States of America who have ties to Louis Farrakhan, who is the leader of the Nation of Islam, and he's very anti-Semitic, and he said some very anti-Semitic things. There was recently some Democratic politician in Washington, D.C., saying that the weather is being controlled by the Rothschilds, who is this bankers, these old family of Jewish bankers, and people say like, oh, Libya and Syria are the two countries that don't have a Rothschild-ran central bank, so there's this kind of conspiracy. So anyway, do they say Judaism is part of it, part of this Western society's Western culture? And if you are absorbing Judaism as part of Western culture, then why would you not absorb Islam as part of Western culture? Is Chancellor Angela Merkel, right when she says Islam belongs to Germany? Because if Christianity does, then aren't they coming from the same source? But anyway, my friend posted this thing about how why Islam is one of the great monotheistic religions, why it's the one that didn't go through the Enlightenment. Now, it's also a lot younger than the other ones. I think it's like 600 years younger than Christianity. And then Judaism, of course, is older than Christianity, as Jesus Christ was born to a Jewish family, and I think he was Jewish his whole life until he died. And then Christianity, of course, came out years after Jesus was born. I mean, Jesus died. Yeah, after he was born, because it was like he was born. He didn't start it the day he was born. But so that's a link that's going to be there below. But the last thing I was talking about, what I wanted to mention when I was talking about three wise men, people not basing their life, their way of approaching life on Christianity, is I find it hard. I find it a bit of a hurdle to get over, especially if somebody leads off for that. But one of my really good recent friends, actually, she is rather devout, and but she's also really into philosophy. So I kind of have to weigh those two things. I'm like, okay, which one is more important with our relationship, with our friendship? And yeah, and you have people like Jordan Peterson who are doing some amazing things in my opinion, about just sharing information and spreading the knowledge, spreading the ability to have people actually question themselves, better themselves, question the societies around them, and just form a better kind of existence. One thing I will say, there seems to be a relationship with Christianity, and at least today, and a certain tolerance for questioning the edicts of Christianity and powerful Christians in that society. Yet you do not see this in Muslim majority countries. There is no blasphemy kind of situation against Christianity. Now, the odd thing you do see is even in majority historically Christian places, there are blasphemy laws being put in to protect Islam, but not saying you can't blaspheme against Christianity. I don't know if eventually the Christian churches will start saying, yeah, let's bring that blasphemy for us as well, but it's still not there. Even in African nations where the church is a lot more powerful. The relationship between church elders and politicians, like right now here in Kenya, when there was that political strife, they normally have, the church leaders are coming together to kind of have a conversation, and they go talk to the politicians and say, can we come together? Can we do this? You often have politicians going to actual churches and events like that and giving political speeches in there. So the relationship between church and state here is a lot closer. It's not ingrained in the Constitution or anything, but it's a lot closer. I think the people are a lot more open and devout about their faith. So you have that kind of situation where you have someone like Jordan Peterson saying those things, but then when it comes to his Christianity, when it comes to religion, I'm just like, I get a big question mark. I'm like, I don't really get this. I can't compartmentalize this yet to the point where I understand that, yes, I get you saying all these positive things, but how come you're also building this illogical thing on these same kind of foundations? Now, it's still helping people, so I think it's still positive. And I think when he's talking about hitting kids, he said it like there's some specific situations where if the kid is in dire danger, you can hit the kid. When it's the whole kind of thing where it's like, okay, if the kid is running into the street, then yeah, you're allowed to grab the kid and pull the kid back and jerk the kid back. You don't have to just explain to the kid why he shouldn't go into the street, why he shouldn't touch this hot stove. So I get that. And I think that's the extent that he's gone to when it comes to actually hitting kids. But I think he might have gone to it a little further. If you guys have actual sources on that, I might look that up. But for me, that whole Christianity part of Jordan Peterson has been something that's kind of made me back up and not be able to really just delve into the material that he's making, that he's releasing, and the information that he's releasing out there. I think he's more of like an apologist when it comes to Christianity. And I don't think he's even trying to curry favor. Like, I think he actually does believe it in some extent, which makes it even more perplexing. But yeah, I don't know. So this was the video about this. Could be links below to this article. Did you know about these misquoted things? Had you corrected somebody about these things before? Are you going to ask anyone these questions? I think the three wise men thing, I think that's a positive thing. If you are Christian, or if you are not, or if you know somebody, ask them about that, because I think that's a basic thing. Like, how would you not know the basic story about how the Godhead came to Earth if you have the material there? Anyway, some frustration with that. Let me know what you guys think about this video. Like, share, and subscribe. Links below to the merchandise store. You can help me out on Patreon, and I'm thinking I'm going to open a PayPal or something, but I just want to find a way to make more regular content. Let me know what you thought about this. Let me know if you're faithful. Let me know if you're unsubbing because I'm not going to be with this a-religious person talking crap about religions. Or, yeah, anyway, let me know your journey when it comes to the faith and belief. And thanks a lot for listening. Until next video, goodbye.